Hi everybody, Stefan back with some more LaserDiscs. In last week's video I talked about a whole bunch of great LaserDisc pickups and a VHD, really cool stuff from Japan. Check that one out if you missed it. I had mentioned last week that I had another box coming which eventually came with what I think is even cooler. This is one of my favorite pickups ever of any form because the number one thing I want to collect on LaserDisc, my number one goal by far, is a complete US and Japanese set of Star Trek. All the shows, all the releases of the movies, complete Star Trek set on LaserDisc. That's my biggest goal for that format, and I already have a few discs already, some movies and some collections, but now I have the biggest ad I've had so far for Star Trek on LaserDisc. These two gorgeous box sets. We're going to have a bunch of pictures here because they're big and it's a lot of discs and it's hard to take them all out on camera, so I'm going to have a bunch of pictures coming up. Star Trek Voyager, the entire first season on LaserDisc, comes in two box sets, volume 1 here. It's so glossy. It's really reflecting a lot of light because it's just this beautiful glossy thing here. It's hard to, if you're in person, you can see it so much better. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Every disc has just beautiful pictures here. It's set 1, and then set 2 with Captain Catherine Janeway on the cover here. It's a little bit bigger, set 2 here. So two giant box sets comprising the first full season of Star Trek Voyager. Beautiful, amazing. I absolutely love these box sets. The box sets themselves are so collectible, and if you're a Star Trek fan, they're just an amazing, gorgeous addition to your collection, but they look and sound amazing on LaserDisc. The episodes of Star Trek, it's really my preferred format to watch Star Trek on after having now episodes of the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and now a full season of Voyager, plus a Caretaker and another package there. After watching so much Star Trek on LaserDisc, I've really come to love it on that format. It's definitely my preferred way to watch it. It's amazing. And Star Trek Voyager, I'm really happy that that's one of the first shows that I got a big collection of. It's not my absolute favorite Star Trek series, but it's one of my favorites. And just being Star Trek, and especially 90s Star Trek, one of my favorite shows of all time. And Star Trek I've talked about in so many different videos. For both my wife and I, it's really such a huge part of who we are as people because we grew up so engrossed in it, and really a lot of even just the morality that we took from it growing up as children. It was such a wonderful experience, and I really appreciate growing up with it within Star Trek and within that fandom and within just loving these shows and enjoying them. And Star Trek Voyager is very special to me, I think partially because of when it came out. I grew up watching The Next Generation and the original series movies and reruns of the original series, and watching marathons sometimes on like the Sci-Fi Channel and stuff like that. I was so engrossed in Star Trek. We had Deep Space Nine was well under its way and had already become my favorite TV show of all time. And then after Next Generation ended, we're going to get another Star Trek series. So the 90s it was endless Star Trek between reading books, and you almost always had like two Star Trek shows at the same time, and it was just Star Trek overload, and that's what I remember the most from that decade, is just the Star Trek overload. And Star Trek Voyager then came out in 1995. I would have been about 8 years old, going on 9, and it was such a huge event for both of our families. My wife and I have talked about, and it was such a huge thing that I even remember what we had for dinner that night, with the Star Trek Voyager appearing with the launch of UPN, and that's something that's also would be kind of odd for someone who's younger. When I was like 8 years old, the whole idea of another network launching was still a big deal. It's so different now that it doesn't have that same connotation, that resonance. The whole idea of another network was launching on basic cable, and it was launching with a Star Trek. And sitting down and watching Caretaker, that 2-hour premiere, I remember we sat down in our old house, the one my mom and dad and my sister and I lived in. My brother wasn't born yet. We went down to the basement. We had this big TV set up, and we sat down. I remember we had tacos that night. My mom and dad were sitting on the couch, and my sister and I had our own little table off to the side, and we were sitting and we watched the premiere of Star Trek Voyager. And I just immediately fell in love with it. I was so excited. I still like Caretaker. It's one of my favorite premiere episodes ever. And even though Voyager sometimes over the years had a few issues down the road, I just absolutely fell in love with it. And in particular, that first season in particular, I have such strong memories of, because I was so excited to get into it, and it lived up to my expectations, and I just really enjoyed so much about it. I loved all the characters. B'Elanna, I really enjoyed. She's probably my favorite character on Voyager. I really enjoyed Captain Catherine Janeway. I really came to like her. She's one of my favorite captains. She'd probably be, I'd say if I had to rank the Star Trek captains, she'd be like my third favorite overall. Just fantastic, and I really enjoyed her character, and I loved the combination of her and then Chakotay, and I really liked those two together. I think as a command unit, I really think they worked really well, as a captain and first officer, and I really enjoyed so much of that crew. And in that first season, they really held true to a lot of the issues of the integration of the Maquis crew, and a lot of just fantastic episodes, and it was so much about the exploration of a new area of space that had me so excited as a kid, being like, oh my gosh, they're so far away from home, what new and amazing things are we going to find and explore. And that first season, I think, really lived up to that in my mind, and rewatching it here, I was still really love and enjoy this show, and the promise that first season held of amazing adventures to come. That first season just really kind of got the ball rolling in the right way for me, to where I was really into that series, and just so much of it, even things that I found a little more of a flaw in the first season, I didn't even mind. Things like, to me, during the first season and even into the second, there's nothing more annoying than jealous Neelix. He's so annoying when he enters that realm of jealousy with Tom Paris and Kes. But even in saying that, Neelix as a character I still really liked, and some of my favorite episodes of the first season actually focused heavily on him. So it wasn't that I disliked the character, I disliked that part of him. And every little part that I didn't like about Voyager was kind of that same way, where there might be something that irked me or pushed me the wrong way, but it didn't matter because so much of what was around it was just amazing and awe-inspiring, and I really loved it, and I really got into it. And it was so interesting for me, being a kid, I didn't comprehend till much later in my life the significance of having a female captain, because growing up with things like Star Trek, and especially the incredibly strong female characters in Deep Space Nine, and then watching Voyager, and even things like Buffy, and like so much of what I was watching and reading, especially growing up as a child, it just felt natural. Like it didn't feel significant, because it's like, okay, that's the captain. Like it never dawned on me till I was much older that it was significant that it was a woman, because to me it didn't hold any significance. To me it was just, and my wife said the same thing, that when she was a kid it didn't phase her either. It wasn't until she was much older that she realized how significant it was, because it was just kind of, it didn't matter. Like in the realm of, that we grew up with, in the realm of Star Trek, like it didn't matter, like if you're a male or female or whatever, just you're the person who's in charge, you're the authority figure, and I respect you in your position. And it was an interesting thing that it dawned on me, especially in recent years rewatching Voyager and things like that. It sort of re-entered my mind, that idea of how important that was, and looking back and realizing as a kid it really didn't affect me in that way. And with my wife, the same thing, where it just kind of felt natural and normal. And that's one of those things where I'm, in a way, thankful that something like Star Trek and other things in my life kind of had me to that point where I never really experienced or really understood, and having the understanding of the challenges and how important those types of shows are is important. But I love that I was able to grow up in a world where that wasn't an issue as much, where I had strong women in my life and strong women in the fiction that I was involved in, and it wasn't surrounded by men who were threatened by that. And I really am appreciative of that. And Voyager, I think, especially that first season, really holds so much of that for me, and just such a fantastic series, an incredible box set. I love watching Star Trek on LaserDisc. And now I'm going to end this with a whole bunch of pictures of the box set, all the individual discs and stuff here, because there's a lot to look at and some beautiful artwork.